Hi there. If you're watching this video, it's because you're enrolled in the course Immunology with Professor Demasi. That's me. So welcome to the course. This is going to serve as the first lecture for the course, first lecture video, which begins Chapter 1, Introduction to the Immune System. And so what we're going to talk about in this video is just basically an introduction to the immune system, which you most likely have heard before from freshman biology. We're going to ease into the immune system, which is very complicated. Why is the immune system so complicated? It has a lot of cells, a lot of proteins involved. Why? Well, because of pathogens. Now, what's a pathogen? Well, hopefully you've taken microbiology and you learned about all sorts of different viruses and bacteria and microorganisms. Well, pathogens are microorganisms that can cause disease when they enter our bodies. They can colonize us, they can divide, they can damage our organs and systems and cause disease and death, which is a bad thing. So let's talk about the different types of pathogens. Now, this is not a microbiology course. I'm not going to expect you to know all sorts of different viruses and bacteria, but I am going to expect you to have taken microbiology and recall characteristics of pathogens such as viruses and bacteria. So, viruses. What are viruses? Viruses are these small, some people think they're alive. They're not really alive. They don't have a metabolism, but they infect our cells where they can express their genes and replicate in our cells. And in doing so, they can cause damage to our bodies. So you can see here the table from Chapter 1 that talks about all sorts of different pathogens. So these are viruses that can infect our cells in different parts of our bodies and can cause disease. So when I'm drawing a virus in my lectures, I'm typically drawing this little squiggly line in the middle, which represents a viral genome. Usually, so viruses can be either DNA viruses or RNA viruses. And then I draw this sort of little hexagon and spikes, which would represent the viral capsid or the viral envelope. So this is my very generic drawing for a virus. And so what you need to think about when you're looking at these drawings is that those molecules on the surface, on the outside of that little pointy structure, those molecules are the viral antigens. Those are primarily what the immune system is going to recognize, although the immune system can also recognize proteins within the virus, and we're going to talk about that in much later chapters. But those molecules on the outside and even molecules on the inside can be recognized by the immune system and can trigger an immune response. So when you think about these molecules, these viruses, think about the fact that they have to be recognized by the immune system. And what's going to be recognized? It's the molecules within the virus, so we'll call them viral antigens. We also have another class of pathogens called bacteria. And you spend a lot of time in microbiology learning about the different types of bacteria. And again, this is not a microbiology course. I'm not going to expect you to know these, but I'm going to expect that you can recall characteristics of bacteria. So when I draw a bacteria, I draw, I could draw rods, I could draw all sorts of different shaped bacteria. Usually when I draw a bacteria, it's this sort of oval with sort of squiggles on the outside. And again, those molecules on the outside, whether they be proteins or glycoproteins or sugars or lipids, those are going to be the antigens. Those are going to be molecules that can be recognized by the immune system and allow us to mount a defense. The third and fourth class of pathogens we don't talk as much about in this course, but again, they are going to be organisms that can colonize our body, that can cause disease and death. So fungi, which are eukaryotes, things like yeast, different yeast infections. Those are eukaryotes. Those are not prokaryotes like bacteria are, but they still can colonize our body and cause disease. And then the fourth class of pathogens is known as parasites or worms. These are large, either unicellular or multicellular organisms that can infect our bodies, grow and divide, and cause disease. So things like, the Plasmodium that causes malaria, or different types of worms that can colonize our bodies. So we'll talk about these as well in the course. Okay, so why, this goes back to the question, why is the immune system so complicated? Well, think about all these pathogens. They all look different at a molecular level. The proteins, the glycoproteins, the sugars, the lipids on their surface, they're all going to have a different look, different three-dimensional structure. So the immune system has to be able to distinguish those pathogens in our body and recognize them. But they all look different. So the immune system has to be able to recognize molecules that it's never seen before, and a lot of different molecules. So the immune system is complicated because all of these pathogens have complicated and different distinct shapes. Secondly, pathogens infect different locations in the body, both at a tissue organ level and a cellular level. So again, the immune system has to be able to patrol and recognize pathogens in different areas of the body. Now, we could be talking about organs and tissues, the difference between the lungs and the skin and the liver, or inside blood, or we can be talking more at a cellular level. So here now you see two drawings of pathogens. There's a virus and there's a bacterium. And what are those squares? Well, those are cells. Those are your human cells. And typically when I'm drawing cells in my lectures, I'm drawing them as blue squares or blue rectangles. So those are cells. Those are our cells. So where are we going to find pathogens in relation to our cells? Well, pathogens can either exist outside of our cells, extracellularly, so in the fluid outside of our cells, whether those fluids are the extracellular fluid, sometimes known as interstitial fluid, or the larger fluids of our body, like plasma in blood or lymph. So pathogens can be outside of our cells, in the fluid outside our cells, or pathogens can be inside our cells, in the cytoplasm of the cells, or even in compartments inside the cell, such as a vesicle. So the immune system has to be able to recognize pathogens in these different locations. So there are going to be a lot of molecules that will be detecting possible pathogens in these locations. The other reason the immune system is so complicated is because pathogens have evolved to evade the immune system. A successful pathogen can infect the body and hide from the immune system, so it can replicate and replicate and replicate and produce more of itself. And so there's an ongoing evolutionary battle between our immune system and a successful pathogen. So the immune system has had to evolve to be very complex in order to allow us to defend ourselves against these pathogens. So these are some reasons that the immune system is so complex. So let's start finally talking about the immune system. So this is going to be a very overarching theme in the immune system. In every single lecture I give, we're going to basically be talking about one of three things. Everything I talk about in the immune system is one of these three things. The first, which we talk a lot about, is recognition. So the immune cells and proteins in our bodies, and we are going to learn many different immune proteins and many different immune cells. These proteins can be free-floating in our fluids, or they could be attached to the surface of our cells. They could actually be inside our cells. So the immune cells and immune proteins in our body have to be able to distinguish between self, so our cells, and non-self, the pathogens. So we have an entire array of proteins and other molecules that will bind to other molecules, and that binding could recognize those molecules as self or non-self. The non-self ones we want to mount an attack against. So when I talk about all these proteins and all these cells, think about, okay, what are these doing? Are they recognizing the pathogen? And if so, how are they recognizing them? What characteristics of the pathogen does it have that allows the protein or cell to recognize it? The second theme is the effector function. So once the immune system has recognized a pathogen, it's going to help remove that pathogen from the body. So that can either involve killing the pathogen by poking holes in it, or allowing it to be phagocytosed, clearing it from the body, flushing it out of the lungs or into the mucus. So an effector function refers to the physiological effect of recognizing the pathogen and help in neutralizing or killing the pathogen. So when we talk about the immune system and immune cells and immune protein, some of the effector functions we'll see involve clearing the pathogen, killing the pathogen, poking holes in the pathogen, preventing the pathogen from attaching to our cells. So these are all called effector functions. Lastly, we're going to talk about communication or signaling. When immune cells and immune proteins recognize a pathogen, that could help attack the pathogen, or it can send signals to other cells, to other tissues, to distant tissues, and those signals will actually help us mount a stronger response to clearing out the pathogen. So we're going to learn about all these molecules, cytokines being one class of them, that will be released from immune cells and can tell other parts of the body, either locally or systemically, that we need to mount a stronger attack. We need more help to clear these pathogens. So these are the three overarching themes of the immune system. In every single video, we will be talking about either recognition or effector function or communication. So that is introduction video number 1.